There is a lesser-known expression in the practice of law inspired by the great Ice Cube. You had better check your experts before you wreck your experts, lest they be known as Rexperts. Viva Frei, Montreal litigator turned YouTuber, and the impeachment inquiry hearings is turning into the next vlog that keeps on vlogging. I have done a bunch of videos on the subject, breaking down depositions, analyzing the situation, reading the actual transcript. I'll link that playlist up here, give it a watch. And incidentally, for those of you who say, I always say link up here and you never see the link up here, that might have to do with the platform that you are watching this on, in which case I will put the playlist at the end of the video in the end cards. So where are we at now with the impeachment inquiry hearings? We are at the stage of the experts, constitutional experts, explaining why it's appropriate and justified to impeach Donald Trump based on that conversation he had with the president of Ukraine, Zelensky. I coined an expression a while back to the effect that we learn from the mistakes of others, but we learn much more quickly from our own mistakes. And I think a lot of people are going to learn from what I believe to be some key mistakes in selecting the constitutional experts to testify as to why Donald Trump should be impeached. We'll get there, but first an anecdote from my own practice, a mistake that I only had to make once before learning forever. I was involved in a file regarding an alleged latent defect in a commercial property. Both parties had experts come in to testify as to the existence or non-existence of the alleged defect. And the ultimate paradox of experts is that they are supposed to be independent, objective, and yet for some reason, each party's expert always says what that party wants that expert to say. So both parties in this file have their experts, both experts have filed their expert reports, and come trial time, we have what is called a voir dire to determine whether or not the expert is going to be recognized as an expert witness. A voir dire literally means a see say. Voir dire, see say. And it's sort of like a mini trial to determine the admissibility of evidence. It can also serve as a mini trial to determine the admissibility of witness testimony and to determine the qualification of an expert witness as an expert. And I spent over 2 days with our witness going over his credentials, going over his expert report, going over the substance of the lawsuit. Come trial time, we have the witness sit down in front of the judge for the voir dire to determine whether or not the court is going to recognize this expert witness as an expert. I ask my questions, qualifications, submit the CV, etc., etc. The first question opposing counsel asks the expert witness is whether or not he's ever had his permit revoked. And it was at this time, for the first time, that I learned that our expert witness had had his certification revoked, if only temporarily, but it didn't look good in front of a judge. Ultimately, my expert was nonetheless recognized as an expert by the court, but it did nonetheless cast something of a shadow over that expert. And the moral of that story is check your expert before you wreck your expert. And bringing this back to the impeachment inquiry hearings, we recently had the constitutional legal experts testify as to why what Donald Trump is accused of doing is in fact sufficient to impeach him. And it was in watching Representative Matt Gaetz' cross-examination of two of these constitutional experts that I was asking myself if anyone had actually done their due diligence on these experts. So I'm going to walk through Matt Gaetz' cross-examination of these legal scholars because there is some good in his cross-examination, there is some not so good in his cross-examination, and I'm going to share my thoughts on it.
The will of the American people also elected Donald Trump to be the president of the United States in the 2016 election, and there's one party that can't seem to get over it. Now, we understand the fact that in 2018, you took the House of Representatives, and we haven't spent our time during your tenure in power trying to remove the Speaker of the House, trying to delegitimize your ability to govern. Frankly, we'd love to govern with you. We'd love to pass USMCA. We'd love to put out a helping hand to our seniors and lower prescription drug prices. It's the will of the people you ignore when you continue down this terrible road of impeachment.
All right, and we have our typical grandstanding. I say this without judgment, but this is grandstanding. 30 seconds in and we don't have a question yet. And this type of grandstanding is going to be like preaching to the choir if you agree with him. It's going to be like talking to deaf ears if you don't agree with him. And maybe it's going to sway some people in the middle who are undecided. But it's grandstanding. He is seizing on the opportunity to take advantage of his 5 minutes to not ask questions but make statements prior to asking questions. But let's get to the questions.
Professor Gerhardt, you gave money to Barack Obama, right?
My family did, yes.
4 times?
That sounds about right. Yes.
An evasive and defensive answer to a question the expert witness ought to have known was coming.
Mr. Feldman wrote articles entitled, "Trump's Wiretap Tweets Raise Risk of Impeachment." He then wrote, "Mar-a-Lago ad belongs in impeachment file." And then Mr. Jake Flanagan wrote in Quartz, a Harvard law professor thinks Trump could be impeached over fake news accusations. My question, Professor Feldman, is since you seem to believe that the basis for impeachment is even broader than the basis that my Democrat colleagues have laid forward, do you believe you're outside of the political mainstream on the question of impeachment?
All right, I don't like this question because how does he think the witness is going to answer it? Yes, I believe I'm outside of the political mainstream and that my opinion should be discredited as a result. Gaetz brought up some good points with the substance of some of the articles that this expert had written, but in asking this question, he is only giving the expert an opportunity to explain himself away. This is not the type of question that is susceptible of catching an expert witness off guard. This is only going to allow the expert witness to attenuate their position.
I believe that impeachment is warranted whenever the president abuses his power for personal benefit or to corrupt the democratic process.
Did you write an article entitled "It's Hard to Take Impeachment Seriously Now"?
Yes, I did write that article.
And in that article, did you write, hold on, I'm limited on time, sir.
I wrote
did you
that
write,
article.
since the 2018 midterm election, House Democrats have made it painfully clear that discussing impeachment is primarily or even exclusively a tool to weaken President Trump's chances in 2020. Did you write those words?
Did you write those words is a yes or no answer, but the witness doesn't give a yes or no answer. The witness avoids answering the question and goes on to explain why their current position is different from their past position.
Until this call in July 25th, I was an impeachment skeptic. The
Very
call
well.
changed my mind, sir, and for
Thank
good
you. I
reason.
appreciate your testimony.
Gaetz made a great point by bringing up the article and that professor's previous positions. However, in his questioning, he allowed the expert witness to walk away from what that witness said in the past in order to explain why they no longer believe that in the present. And in so doing, allows the witness to attenuate what would have otherwise been a very impactful point.
Changed my mind, sir, and for
Thank
good
you. I
reason.
appreciate your testimony. Professor Carlin, you gave $2,000, or you gave $1,000 to Elizabeth Warren, right?
I believe so.
You gave $1,200 to Barack Obama,
I have no reason to question that.
and you gave $2,000 to Hillary Clinton.
That's correct.
Why so much more for Hillary than the other two?
Because I've been giving a lot of money to charity recently because of all of the poor people in the United States.
Well, those aren't the only folks you've been given to.
All right, that answer makes the witness look belligerent and defensive. And this is something I've said in previous vlogs, but typically when witnesses try to defend their actions under the guise of some benevolent cause, it doesn't look good and it doesn't look sincere. But this brings us back to our check your experts before you wreck your experts. Did nobody do a due diligence into these experts? They are bringing constitutional and legal scholars to testify before Congress as to why President Trump should be impeached. The least they could do is bring scholars that have the semblance of objectivity. I understand that this is not a legal process. We've talked about it in previous vlogs on the impeachment. But if you were to bring these experts in front of a judge to be recognized as experts, the fact that by their own admissions they are partisan, if not partisan to the core, will affect their credibility as expert witnesses. I can't believe that nobody did their due diligence on these experts, which leads me to believe that they either knew about their past and didn't care about it, or they were somehow banking on the fact that no one would ask them these questions to compromise their integrity as objective experts. Worse still, with respect to Pamela Karlan, the constitutional and legal expert there to give her expert opinion on why Trump should be impeached in law. I don't know if Matt Gaetz knew this at the time. I suspect that if he did, he would have asked a question about it, but apparently 2 years ago, Pamela Karlan was speaking on some constitutional law panel and explained that her disdain for Donald Trump was so severe that she actually had to cross the street to avoid walking in front of his hotel.
So I was struck, I came in from the airport yesterday and I got off the bus from Dulles down at L'Enfant Plaza and I walked up to the hotel, and as I was walking past what used to be the old post office building and is now the Trump Hotel, which I had to cross the street, of course.
Are you staying there?
God, no. Never. Never.
Can you imagine that this is supposed to be the constitutional legal scholar, the expert, with an objective legal opinion explaining to Congress why the evidence is sufficient to impeach Donald Trump? On video previously talking about how she has such disdain for Donald Trump that she actually has to cross the street to avoid the aura of the Trump Hotel. Do your due diligence on your experts and do not bank on other people's ignorance. It's something that I will say time and time again. In the era of the internet, you can hide nothing. All right, back to the questioning.
Now, have you ever been on a podcast called Versus Trump?
I think I was on a live panel that the people who ran the podcast called Versus Trump.
On that, do you remember saying the following? Liberals tend to cluster more. Conservatives, especially very conservative people, tend to spread out more, perhaps because they don't even want to be around themselves. Did you say that?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did.
Yes, I did.
Do you understand how that reflects contempt on people who are conservative?
Oh, you had your point there, Gaetz. You made your point. You didn't need to ask this question. This is that scene from A Civil Action when John Travolta asks that one question too many.
Does it upset you to learn this?
Very much so.
Really? Why?
Unless you know exactly what the answer is going to be, never, ever ask a witness why.
That land has been in my family for 3 generations.
That land to me is hallowed ground.
Gaetz made his point. It could not have gotten any more impactful than that, and now he goes and asks a question of opinion and belief and thinks that he's going to stump the witness again. He's not going to stump the witness again.
No, what I was talking about there was the natural tendency, if you put the quote in context, the natural tendency of a compactness requirement to favor a party whose voters are more spread out.
Well,
and I do
Professor,
not have contempt
hold on.
for
Again,
conservatives.
I'm
and I
very
do not
limited
have
on time,
contempt for
Professor. And so I just have to say, when you talk about how liberals want to be around each other and cluster, and conservatives don't want to be around each other, and so they have to spread out, it makes people, you may not see this from, like the ivory towers of your law school.
You should not have asked that second question. You made your point with the first question, and you allowed her to provide something of a convoluted answer that might confuse anyone who was otherwise clear on the subject before then.
But it makes actual people in this country
When
feel
the
like,
president
excuse
calls
me, you don't get to interrupt me on this time.
Ooh, you see, this might have been one of those points where I would have let the witness interrupt me. It was obvious by what she managed to say that she was going back to comments Donald Trump made on the campaign trail in 2016. Now, I'm not going to repeat those statements because I don't want this video getting demonetized or worse yet, taken down. Had he allowed Carlin to finish that sentence, he would have gotten her to inadvertently admit that her belief that Trump should be impeached in fact predates the conference call with Zelensky. He would have allowed her to confirm that her belief that Trump should be impeached actually existed before any of this. That it existed in virtue of comments he made back on the 2016 campaign trail. Had he let her go on. And I believe it was Napoleon that said, when your opponent is in the midst of making a mistake, don't interrupt them.
Let me also suggest that when you invoke the president's son's name here, when you try to make a little joke out of referencing Barron Trump, that does not lend credibility to your argument. It makes you look mean. It makes you look like you're attacking someone's family, the minor child of the President of the United States. So let's see if we can get into the facts. To all of the witnesses, if you have personal knowledge of a single material fact in the Schiff report, please raise your hand.
And this is what a lot of people are touting as a zinger, but it actually doesn't prove as much of a point as Gaetz thinks it does. Expert witnesses, by definition, are not witnesses of fact. Expert witnesses are witnesses of opinion, and they do not need nor are they intended to have first-hand knowledge of the facts. So from a question of optics and impact, it looks good, but in law, it doesn't really prove all that much.
And let the record reflect. No personal knowledge of a single fact. And you know what? That continues on the tradition that we saw from Adam Schiff, where Ambassador Taylor could not identify an impeachable offense. Mr. Kent never met with the president. Fiona Hill never heard the president reference anything regarding military aid. Mr. Hale was unaware of any nefarious activity with aid. Colonel Vindman even rejected the new Democrat talking point that bribery was invoked here. Ambassador Volker denied that there was a quid pro quo, and Mr. Morrison said there was nothing wrong on the call. The only direct evidence came from Gordon Sondland, who spoke to the President of the United States, and the President said, "I want nothing, no quid pro quo." And you know what? If wiretapping a political opponent's an impeachable offense, I look forward to reading that Inspector General's report, because maybe it's a different president we should be impeaching.
All right, and then we end with a little more grandstanding. Representative Gaetz summarizing and giving us his opinion on what he thinks of all of the other witnesses of fact. This is not about asking anyone any questions. This is about saying to the world what he believes. Again, it's going to be preaching to the choir on one hand or talking to deaf ears on the other, and maybe, just maybe, it's going to have some influence on people in the middle. And then we end it with a little off-topic burn and being gavelled out, because I've got to tell you, there is no more glorious of an exit than being gavelled out.
Because maybe it's a different president we should be impeaching.
And that is the vlog, and all of this highlights one thing, is that experts have to give the appearance of objectivity. And they have to do this even if they are mandated by one of the parties to promote that party's interests. And this is a very important nuance to appreciate. It's not because an expert represents one party that the court is necessarily going to regard that expert as partisan. That being said, if the expert reeks of lacking objectivity, that will affect their credibility as an expert. Calling up constitutional and legal scholars as experts when those experts have been consistent donors to the Democratic Party to testify as to why, in their expert opinion, the Republican president should be impeached, when one of those experts is so repulsed by the Republican president that she has to cross the street to avoid his hotel, we are no longer dealing with experts that even give the illusion of objectivity. And if people did their due diligence, knew this, and nonetheless called these particular experts up as experts, I think that's a mistake. And I'm not saying that they have to be donors to the Republican Party in order to give the illusion of objectivity. I find it very difficult to believe that we live in a world where we cannot find constitutional or legal scholars who have not donated to either political party. And if this entire process is indeed to appear objective and nonpartisan, that is what you need. Anyhow, I hope you learned something. If you like my videos and content, be sure to like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, drop a comment in the comment section below. If you want some merch or you want to support the channel, all those links are in the pinned comment, but share the channel because that helps a great deal. And if you want to see a great breakdown of a non-political deposition, I'm going to link a video right here, give it a watch, and now you know your vlog. Peace out. Booyah!